Hey there, it's Rachel Mullins, the host of Hashtag No Filter Fridays on Public House Media.
What's up, everybody? This is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Press Row, where we talk about the biggest issues in sports with the analysts, experts, and reporters who cover them. No nonsense, hard-hitting interviews on the sports topics you're talking about. A new show comes out every single Thursday. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Press Row. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello and welcome to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. My name is Brice Burge.
And I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Brice, we have a unique show again tonight. We're going to go with talking about Christian Pulisic's move to Chelsea. And then we're going to have a kind of an EPL special kind of an episode where we tackle the winter break of the EPL and where everybody stands after playing 21 games.
Your Soccer Passport is sponsored by Squadcast, as podcasters that deal with analysts and guests from around the world. Being able to record remotely is key. Current industry standards rely heavily on internet connection, but Squadcast changes that with a simple browser-based tool that requires no additional software to install. The audio is recorded locally as high-quality WAV files, then uploaded to the host computer, allowing solid audio quality. To get started with your remote podcasting recording experience, go to squadcast.fm for your 14-day free trial. All right, you brought him up, Christian Pulisic, in a record transfer for an American player, smashing John Brooks' former total in 2017. Pulisic will be heading to Chelsea for a whopping $73 million transfer. This is a big deal. It's a big aspect of what we've expected for a long time out of a player of Pulisic's category and skill level. What does this move mean to you, and what does this move mean for U.S. in terms of their standing in international soccer?
I think for Pulisic himself, this is kind of a move that was expected, I guess, because Dortmund's always been a selling club. They produce the players, and then they go off and sell them for high amount. He will stay with them till the end of the season and then join Chelsea next summer after the Gold Cup. But for him specifically moving to Chelsea, it's a big move. It's a step up in terms of what the kind of club prestige is and with the levels of players he's going to be at. And there is a natural fit for him, I think, at Chelsea right now because you have older players like Pedro and Willian kind of starting to fade out on the wrong side of 30. So I think when you look at him at Chelsea, that's kind of where you see where he could get the most minutes. For the U.S., he kind of tends to play behind the main striker and play like as a number 10 and have a free-flowing role. But kind of at Dortmund, and I think same thing at Chelsea, he's going to be more on the wing side. And I think that's where he'll be able to get the most minutes for Chelsea next year. Looking the way they play and looking at the roster they kind of have now and where he can kind of fit with them.
That's one of the big issues about Chelsea moving forward is that now that Sarri's kind of come in there, they've kind of changed things up. They've got players that, again, are kind of rotating through, some that will be heading off. I know that is just a lot of available knowledge for a guy that really wasn't going to be able to learn anymore. That's something that we've started to see with younger players, especially from France, from Spain, from Brazil. They're running out of players to learn from. As they kind of develop more, they rely on the club experience to really kind of break them free of just their national standings. And for an American-based player, that's even more important just because you got to have that difference in style and you have so many opportunities to learn that stuff. My thing is that when you have a guy like Hazard that's still there in Chelsea and whether or not he will finally go to Real Madrid after all of these rumors, how will that shake things up even more? Are you starting to see especially with him remaining in the Bundesliga, are you going to see a completely different Chelsea side once the Gold Cup's over? Once he joins the team in the summer, the way that Chelsea will be considerably different in my thought process for Pulisic when he goes up there. It definitely creates an interesting situation for him.
Yeah, it does, but I think that's why it's good that he shows up in the summer and not mid-season. That because already when you join mid-season on a loan like this, these teams already kind of have flow, especially if they're not doing too bad like the way Chelsea aren't. They've kind of steadied the ship. It's hard to kind of show up midway through there and make an impact right away. So when you have a summer to work with the coach and kind of get his philosophy and win him over that way, especially when you might be joined by other new players, that actually I think kind of helps Pulisic instead of just showing up kind of cold clocked midway through the season when they kind of have their rhythm going already. They just got done with their massive winter break playing all these games. So I think joining them at the end of the season instead of midway through the season helps him actually. Now everybody kind of has more of a fresh start.
And that fresh start, I think, is going to be big, especially for Pulisic as he starts to mature. When you have, again, how does this impact back to the American side? You have a new coach. Finally, you've been the poster child of frustration for the men's national team the last 2 years. You want to have an ability to learn something, get a fresh start, and kind of have that terminal aspect of creating a new opportunity. And I think that's a big factor for Pulisic as he moves forward, because I think that's the best way that he can actually help his national team. When you're talking about the U.S. men's national team developing further, based on who is their best player, that's always something that has kind of struggled with the United States in the last couple of years. Either you got a Michael Bradley not playing the right position, you've got people moving around in the wrong spots, you don't have a hole to fill, and then when you're up top, you're not getting that 10-9 kind of relationship regardless of who's in that spot. So now when you've got Pulisic able to play in some different roles, see some different opportunities, and then still have the movement, still have the speed, still have the increased passing lanes and the opportunities to find something on offense that he can bring to this roster for the men's national team, it's only going to make things better. It's frustrating for me, though, with all this, because, I mean, Chelsea's still in a spot where they could go out and make a difference. They are in the fourth spot on the table, so we'll kind of go around a little bit to how Chelsea's been this season. They're 13-5-3 with a plus 22 goal differential, but they've got 44 points, which is 4 behind Tottenham for third and 3 in front of Arsenal. Again, that 4th-5th matchup or 4th-5th placing on the table is big because that's the difference between champions and Europa Leagues. But that all put together, there's got to be some concerns for Chelsea, because this is, I kind of want to compare them to the Baltimore Ravens a little bit, that they've got something new. They've been doing well so far this season. The question is now that the second half of the season is coming up, will Chelsea eventually be figured out? Will teams have a better understanding of what to expect out of these teams? What will they do as they head towards these games? I think actually by the time that this podcast is released, the teams will be preparing for their matchup against Tottenham in a very important matchup. So what do we expect out of Chelsea from the second half of the season now that this is all said and done?
I think I expect something similar from the first half of the season. I think number one, they still need a forward because Morata has not delivered for them up top. Neither has Giroud, really. So I think that's been their biggest problem. They do create a lot of good chances. Their wing play has been great. Hazard has been arguably the best player in the EPL, but they just lack a true goal scorer the way Spurs have with Kane, the way City have with Aguero, the way Liverpool have with Mo Salah. So I think that's their biggest issue, and unless they go buy somebody, that's going to continue to be their issue all year long. So I think them finishing in between third or fifth is kind of where I see them. Most likely third or fourth. But it makes for an interesting race, at least if we want to get more into the table and how the teams stand. But for them to make a push, they're 10 points back of Liverpool. I just don't see them being able to do that with 17 games left. And even catching like a team like City, they just kind of seem just a goal scorer away from really being able to challenge those two. So they're definitely in that battle with Spurs, Arsenal, and Chelsea, with Spurs and Arsenal for that third, fourth spot. And I think they're going to struggle to score goals. And I think that's going to be their main issue that they've had all year is, can Morata step up? Can Drew step up? And if they don't, can they go out and buy somebody this month that can help them actually score goals?
Right now, in that Chelsea roster, Hazard is the most reliable goal scorer for the team. With 10 goals. He's also leading in assists with 9, and there's a big drop-off before you get to two of those guys that you brought up. Pedro Second with 6 goals, and Giroud has 4 assists. That's just such a massive drop-off compared to somebody that you need to be up there near the front. They're not scoring goals in that regard. You know, after everything that's happened in Manchester United with the way that they're going, I mean, it's closer for Manchester United. Oh, it's actually equal to go up to Manchester City as it is to drop down to Manchester United for the second half of the season. And Man U has already gone on a tear since then. I mean, Chelsea does have to be aware of this kind of stuff, because if they're not scoring goals efficiently, even though they're creating opportunities, what's left on the back end. I think they've done a good job in terms of keeping teams away from their own goals. They've had a number of clean sheets this year. But again, most of them have been from down south in the bottom of the table, and we'll talk about that a little bit too after the break. But now that Chelsea's got this and you got some guys up there, let's talk about Man U just quickly, not so much on the Mourinho aspect. Well, we can go there too, but they're 4-0 in their last 4 games, and they are now climbing up the table, and they could be that team that disrupts that top spot. I mean, it's a completely different race when you're thinking about, you know, all right, well, I've definitely got a Europa spot available, but then you've got that team that goes from 3 to 6. Now it's very interesting to see how those teams respond.
Yeah, I think it was very shrewd, the firing of Mourinho when they did it, because they did it right after they lost 3-1 to Liverpool. And then when you looked at the schedule, those 4 wins that the interim coach has been able to get, they've all been below bottom 10 teams that Solskjaer has been able to get. But, you know, those are games that you expect United to win, and under Mourinho, they weren't exactly getting those results. So it's been a good building for them to get those results against Huddersfield, against Bournemouth, against Newcastle. And now, you know, the first big test is this Sunday against Spurs. But they're just playing happier, more free-flowing. You can tell they're enjoying it more. And I think that's the most important thing. And I think that's what kind of builds momentum that can possibly give them the challenge for a top 4. But I think, yeah, they won games they're supposed to, and now the big first test is against Spurs, who they're 10 points behind for 3rd in the EPL. And to see if they have the ability against the top team to match not only the intensity but the quality, I think that's going to be the big issue. Can they match the quality of Spurs coming up?
That'll be difficult, but I mean, at least the one thing here too is that Tottenham is in the middle of a whole bunch of tough things on their schedule. I mean, yes, they've had a couple of easier ones the last couple of times, but with Cardiff City, and then they had an FA Cup blowout where they won 7-0. But before that, they also got beat pretty handily by Wolverhampton, and you know, Tottenham has shown their ability to lose in impressive ways just as well as they win in impressive ways. They're 16-0-5 this season to be 3rd, and there were a number of games that they lost that they probably could have had a different result if they just tweaked one little thing. And that kind of aspect of Tottenham this year, I think, has really made the Spurs just a little bit more alarming in their own ways. And so I think they're a lot more apt of one of the top 5 teams in that table to kind of start sliding down a little bit. But I think that's something as team goes down the table and we start talking about relegation and who else is available in the EPL, we'll take on that situation in the part after the break. We're going to take the break right now. Worldwide headlines are up next, and then when we return, we'll finish up the EPL discussion here on Your Soccer Passport.
This is John Lauder, host of The Cheap Seats here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, The Cheap Seats, where we talk about sports from the fans' perspective. A new show comes out every Monday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of The Cheap Seats. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Time now for Worldwide Headlines here on Your Soccer Passport, a segment touching on some of the other big news from around the soccer world. Orlando City FC looks like they have found Kaká's replacement, bringing in Brazilian national Diego. Diego is currently with Flamengo, but their new manager said that they are uninterested in keeping the former Brazilian national team member. Diego has played in Atletico Madrid, Porto, and Wolfsburg in the past. The Asian Cup has kicked off. India and Iran both had big wins, while China and South Korea salvaged one-goal victories against Kyrgyzstan and the Philippines, respectively. Australia was also upset 1-0 by Jordan. Groups E and F start today and tomorrow, while the knockout stage will start Sunday, January 20th. And almost halfway through the Australian A-League, the top of the league is starting to define itself as the top four teams of Perth, Melbourne, Sydney, and Melbourne City have taken points in at least 4 of their last 5, while the bottom 3 teams of Western Sydney, Brisbane, and Central Coast have just 3 total wins between them. Worldwide Headlines is sponsored by the Public House Media's merchandise shop on TeePublic. The best way to support your favorite shows is with t-shirts, mugs, wall art, and more, all available in the TeePublic shop. Visit tpublic.com/pubhousemedia. That's TEE public.com.
This is Rachel Mullins, host of Hashtag No Filter Friday, here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my new show, Hashtag No Filter Friday, where we talk about all of the sexual misconduct allegations swirling around Hollywood. A new show drops every Friday at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Hashtag No Filter Friday. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome back to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media, sponsored by Squadcast.fm. I'm Brice Burge. You can reach out to me on Twitter at @ThatBriceBurge, Brice with an I. Also got Ivan Sanchez Carrasco with us today, as usual. You can reach out on Twitter to him as well. He's got a lot more soccer stuff on his Twitter account than I do. So, Ivan, what is your Twitter handle again?
Ivan Sanchez C. 90. Ivan Sanchez C 90.
Awesome. So follow him, follow me. Let's do this. Let's jump back in. There was a major game that happened at the top of the table, too, right after the beginning of the new year. That was between Liverpool and Man City. With the way that game turned out, Man City actually came away with 3 points thanks to a late Sané goal at the 72nd minute to lead Man City 2-1 over Liverpool. Pretty close game when you think about it. Lots of opportunities for both teams. So let's talk about it. Ivan, what did you think of this game? Because it was a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I think candidate for game of the year. Number one, the intensity of it before kickoff was fantastic. You can tell the pressure and what both teams knew a victory would mean. If Liverpool would have won, they would have been 10 points up on City. And I think City also knew if they would have lost, to try to get back 10 points with 17 games left would be almost impossible. And right from the first minute, you saw Fernandinho come in on this tackle, and that kind of set the tone for the rest of the match. And that kind of set the intensity of it, too. I mean, maybe the play of the game came in the 18th minute when Mane gets behind the Man City defense and he gets a toe poke past Emerson, the City keeper. And then it hits off the post And then John Stones tries to clear it, hits Emerson, and then the ball is about to go in for an own goal, and then he clears it off the line. And then the goal line technology showed that it was literally about 99.9% in the goal. But you know what, Brice? 99.9% does not get you a goal. It's got to be all the way through the line, and so it didn't go in. Late in the first half, Aguero with a beautiful goal that beats Lovren, and then beats out your post. And I think I can't fault the Liverpool keeper for getting beaten near post like that. I mean, when you're forward, they teach you when you're shooting from an angle, back post low, near post high. And yeah, then the second half started, and Liverpool kind of came off and tied it up in the 60th minute, and then a beautiful little counter run from City kind of with the game winner where Sterling took it. Aguero makes a great run in the near post that kind of opened the space for Sane to come in and finish his shot that goes off the back post, and then they were able to see it out. And I mean, it was just fantastic soccer all the way through. I thought Sane and Sterling were fantastic for City. I thought Fernandinho was as well. So was Aguero, Bernardo. For Liverpool, their front attack was great as well. But they were just too exposed and pinned back by City's outside wings that kind of didn't allow their outside backs to get forward for Liverpool.
With such an important game, that definitely tightens things up at the top of the table. Liverpool 17-3-1, Man City 16-2-3. Those are the top spots, 54, 50 points respectively. Hotspur sitting at 16-0-5 with 48 points just outside that top three. Let's kind of talk about what this means for the top of the table heading into the second half of the year. You know, when looking at who's available at the top, who's going to make it to the Champions League in this matchup with how tight everybody is. And Manchester United is way closer to fourth spot than they are to seventh. So the six top teams in the EPL is starting to pull away. Liverpool, Man City, Tottenham Hotspur, Chelsea, Arsenal, and Man U. Let's talk about it. Let's get your predictions right now. Who do you think is going to be the ones that are moving to the Champions League next season?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go Chelsea 4. Spurs, I think, are going to stay third. And I think City is going to catch Liverpool. Just had a gut feeling. I think once the games start getting tight and Liverpool kind of see the chances that title getting closer and closer, they might tighten up a little bit, and I think City is going to repeat as champion.
It's tough because when I see Liverpool going out there and making opportunities, they haven't been consistent in creating chances as other teams in this top six have. Man U's been hot lately, but again, you broke that down pretty well, that Man U has taken the advantage of teams low on the table beating who you have to beat, and we really haven't seen what they can do when they play against top talent. And that is a huge issue now for this roster as they get ready, and there is uncertainty there. My thing, though, is that Arsenal hasn't looked that good, in my opinion, in the last couple of games anyway. You look at what they've been able to do, and it just seems like the bottom's going to fall out of this group. And those four teams that are fighting for the last two Champions League spots are the ones that seem to be most acceptable. I don't think Leicester, Watford, or Wolverhampton is going to be able to jump up high enough to really kind of get into those matches. I think the middle of the table is fighting within their own way too much. But I look at the talent wise, and I think everybody's going to pretty much stay the same. I think the only exception that you might have is that depending on how hot Tottenham really loses the next couple of games, Chelsea might be able to jump them if things line up just right. That might be your one swap. I think everybody else is going to stay where they're at. But if Man U can continue to win, who knows? Everything's up in the air in that regard. And I think a lot of that has to deal with whether Man U can really be the team that it's been engineered to be. It's just a matter of that leadership.
Yeah, I agree. I think you made a good point with Arsenal. They've kind of fallen off a little bit after they went on their winning streak or non-losing streak. And Yeah, I mean, this game on Sunday is going to be huge for Spurs United. If Spurs win, they're 13 points ahead of United, and they're kind of not locked in for a Champions League spot, but they're very comfortable in that spot, especially with Chelsea and Arsenal kind of also bowing themselves out. And if a few results go their way, Spurs can also think about maybe pushing for the title. They're 6 points back, but that also kind of looks like a long 6 points to get through too. So they're kind of in that middle spot. So a lot of it comes down to what happens Sunday between them and United.
Let's now talk about the bottom of the table. A very interesting setup. I mean, Huddersfield Town only has 10 points. They're 2-4-15, minus 24 goal differential. They're not a good team this year. That's just, no nice way to put it. But when you start talking about the other two relegation spots for 18th and 19th, you've got a very interesting lineup there between Southampton and Fulham. Those two teams have 16 and 14 points respectively. And then Newcastle, Burnley, and Cardiff City all have 18 points. Southampton and Fulham have games against all of those teams, as well as some of the other teams lower on the table. Crystal Palace only has 22 points. They're just as far away from 13th as they are from that three-way tie for 15th. There's lots of possibilities here. Burnley has been very hit or miss, extremely inconsistent. Newcastle United remains there just good enough to not be relegated. Business model, you don't even want to call it an attack plan or a gamesmanship aspect, because we all know what's going on in the ownership at Newcastle. Cardiff City, though, has been kind of surprising. I didn't expect them to fall off this many, and they've let in a lot of game winners in the last 15 minutes of a game that's shown a lot of youth and a lot of immaturity, and just snatching defeat from not defeat in a draw. So, it's interesting to me to see what could possibly happen with these rosters, especially for one like a Southampton that continues to grind out draws. They've had 7 draws this year in games that they really should have lost. They have a negative 17 goal differential, which is actually the best out of that grouping. So it's truly interesting to see how these teams are lining up right now. What do you see at the bottom of the EPL table that kind of sticks out to you about who might be sent down at the end of the season?
Yeah, I think you hit a lot of good points on there. I think Huddersfield is pretty much the only one to it's going to be kind of set that they're going down. I think it's a battle for 2 spots out of right now. I'd say 5-6 teams. Just because it's to gain 8 points at the very minimum. Right now, it's the difference between them and Cardiff City. And that group, for them to make up those 8 points, is going to be super difficult, considering they only have 10 to begin with. Fulham is kind of the team I'm most disappointed in. They spent a lot of money after being promoted, and it just hasn't meshed together well for them. So I think that's the team that could surprise their way out of the relegation zone if they're able to kind of gel a little bit this last half and get things clicking enough for them to make up points. Southampton last year kind of escaped relegation at the very last minute. I think this year it's not going to happen. If I'm playing predictor, I think Newcastle's the one who has the best potential to kind of get their way out. I think just because Rafa Benitez has been a fantastic coach and he's been great for them, and he's kind of been able to steer these group of players from the bad ownership that they've had. And Burnley, last year they impressed so much, but I think they're scoring as many goals as they did last year, but they're just allowing a lot more, and that's just a bad recipe for success. You're not going to get it. So I think, it's the relegation battle, like you said. It's interesting. It forces all these guys to keep playing hard. I think the Crystal Palace is far enough away at the moment that they don't need to worry about relegation per se, just because there's a couple more teams below them. But I mean, it's going to be a battle these last 17 games to see who goes down.
When I look at a lot of these people and a lot of these teams that are presenting themselves, I mean, you really haven't seen anybody that's lost their fighting spirit. On top of it, they all believe that they have the power, they have the talent to really step up and make a difference and keep away from that. I look at the schedule. I don't know what to do with Cardiff City. I mean, that's my big question mark. Cardiff City has games against everybody. I mean, they've got games against every single one of the last 8 teams from Bournemouth to Huddersfield left on their schedule, and it's frustrating in that regard because you have to win. You have to be able to beat who is below you and actually put together a good team. I mean, there's been teams historically across all sports that have struggled with this. Boston Celtics, the last year that they had Pierce and Garnett and all those other guys, you've seen that in baseball. The Chicago Cubs, the years that they couldn't get past the Marlins in the NCLS. You know, it's just there's historical accuracies and time again opportunities that show that Cardiff City has to start winning games more consistently, and they're just not doing it. I look at a team like Southampton who's able to fight for a draw. Newcastle United's kind of got that little thing too where they're just grinding out 1 point at a time and are able to stay away. I think Crystal Palace can do that too. You know, there's a number of teams that are also fighting mid-table. When you look at only a couple points. Let's see, it's 3 points separating 8th place in Watford down to Brighton Hove Albion in 13th. You know, those middle of the table teams are going to be fighting to get better spots there too. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how these guys turn out because the table has definitely, you know, broken into 3 very clear, distinctive groups where a Manchester United and Crystal Palace is in the no man's land between those two. So we'll see how it comes out the rest of the season, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that in later episodes. But we're wrapping up on time. We're only going to go with 2 segments this week because it has been kind of an off-schedule time with the holidays. So, Yvonne, you like your shout-outs? I'm going to give it to you here. What's your shout-out of this week?
Alfonso Cuarón won Best Director last night at the Golden Globes for the movie Roma. Mexican, a beautiful movie based out of Mexico in 1970. So it's really cool to see a director in a movie that kind of shows Mexico in a different light, something that isn't kind of narco-related or something like this, and they're just really beautiful movie. It's on Netflix. Check it out. Alfonso Cuarón, winner, Mexican, Golden Globe, Best Director, baby. He's going for the Oscar next.
All right. Well, that will do it this week for us here on Your Soccer Passport. I'm Brice Bergevon, Sanchez Carrasco as well. Thank you, and listen to us on Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever your favorite podcasts are found. Until next time, you've been listening to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media, sponsored by Squadcast.fm.